Today we're sitting here with Bryan Eisenberg, who has written a new book called I Think I Swallowed an Elephant. And I have enjoyed this book. And when we originally met, we talked about I have a background with how do you eat the elephant?
Yeah.
And you explained to me the difference in the title. And I think that's really the art form that you've built your career around. And I'm excited to sit down and talk to you and talk about elephants and persuasion and everything in between.
I look forward to it. Thank you. You know, we live in a world with a lot of noise. We're overwhelmed.
No.
And so how do you break through the noise? If it's the same old thing you've heard your whole life, your brain says, I don't need it. I can ignore it. But just that subtle shift, there's part of the brain called Broca's area, which our mentor Roy Williams talks a lot about, and you have to surprise Broca. And just by playing on the swallowed part, which also related to how I felt, because I was a beastly 277 pounds at one point. I lost over 100 pounds. I did feel like I swallowed an elephant, right? It wasn't just, sitting at a meal and eating it. So yeah, you've got to be somewhat remarkable today. You can't just go with what people expect.
Well, and to the other point of it is you have to be disciplined and recognize that it's a day out and day in industry grind that you have to do. And to your point of going to 277, you've told that story where that didn't come in overnight.
Never does.
But with intention, you were able to take it down pretty quick. I mean, 10 months.
10 months.
But it was because you were doing it a bite at a time every day intentionally.
I always say the secret to losing 100 pounds is the same way to increasing your conversion rate. It's one micro action at a time, one small decision, one choice. You can't do it all at once, because if you set that goal, I'm going to lose 100 pounds, it's an overwhelming thing. But can I lose 10? Sure. Yeah. Can I lose 20? Oh, fantastic. And then all of a sudden, 20 became 25. Let's celebrate that. That became 50. And it just kept on moving on. And, behind it was the most important thing, right? Which was the reason why. And, we've learned that from Simon Sinek, right? We always talk about, why we do things, right? You got to start with why. But most people miss something. And I don't talk about it as much in this book as I do in one of my previous books, Be Like Amazon. But in his famous TED Talk, he actually used the word belief over and over and over again. The beliefs are what hold your why. The beliefs are that story. And for me, it was saying, look, I built a great agency. We had taken a company that was a service company and turned it into a SaaS platform and took it public through reverse merger. And then the dot bomb, not the dot bomb, we survived that, but there was the other big market shift in 2000, what was it? 8, yeah. And we were like, okay, we're not doing this anymore. And we decided, okay, I had lost essentially my life. I had given everything to this company and to the industry to create conversion rate optimization, right? Which we started as a company in 1998 and just popularized all that content. And I was like, I had 3 little kids and I wanted to be around for them and I wanted to see them grow up. And my middle one, who is just finishing up T-ball, I just wanted to make sure I can keep up with him. And it was getting to that point where at 277, it was a challenge. And that motivation is what made the decision fairly easy for me, because I knew, well, if I'm going to keep up with him, then, I can't eat that pie of pizza.
Yeah. Well, and that story just applies so deeply into everything that we do, and some of the preconceptions of everybody's individual thinking and mind, and how do you meet them where they are, especially when you're meeting them online. You're meeting them in a place where it's a one-sided conversation.
Yeah.
And so as a bona fide expert, and just to clarify, you created conversion metrics. You created this that we now look at Google Analytics, and we're looking at a lot of your framework in that tool. And what a privilege to be in the time and space to make that happen. And how you got there is a great story. But I want to talk about the impact of it, because today I help a company called Charity Ace, and we lead charities through a process of how to raise money. And we use consignment as a tool for that. But we're getting into how do we help them tell their story, because we can work real hard to sell you consignment. I like your model of let's work real hard to make it easy for you to come in and find us as a tool and a place of growth.
Yep.
make it easy to do business with, and then we can go just talk about the impact we're making. And if we can live in a world of impact, I'm really happy.
I mean, and that's why most nonprofits start, right?
Right.
They come from a mission. They want to solve a problem that's out there. And, we get caught in, as Roy Williams always used to say, it's really hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle.
Right.
And they get so caught up in their own lives that they lose perspective of the people looking at that label from outside and what it matters to them. They spend all their time thinking about that problem and their charity and all the inner workings that take to run it and all of that, you get that curse of knowledge that Chip and Dan Heath used to talk about, right? The typical person thinks about your cause how many hours a month?
Right.
If you're lucky, an hour?
10 minutes of an hour.
It's what I'm saying. If you're lucky, an hour. And you're spending 24/7 on it. And it's just hard to get that perspective.
But it's helpful when you know where to look for the perspective. And I think that's what your work and your career has really helped a lot of marketers understand. It's the words on the page are important, but the intentionality of the words. And you keep mentioning Roy, so I want to just talk about Roy Williams for a minute because I was so moved by the Wizard Academy. Wizard of Ads is very similar to your book. It's an easy read, but it's a deep read too.
Yes.
And it's going to challenge you to look in the mirror and where your perceptions and your preconceived life events are driving your decision making. If you can take a step back and quantify it differently, there's probably a better story in there.
There usually is, yes.
Yeah. And so what Roy's done, and I think is influenced through you and through other people that we know, David McGinnis and others, like what a group of people that at some time in the 2005 time period, I think, came together and were just like a force.
Yeah.
What is that story, and how does that impact go?
So we got to step back a little bit. So Roy's probably one of the early content marketers before content marketing was ever a thing. Yeah. Roy started this Monday morning memo that he recorded on an answering machine, and people would call in and listen to his memo. And every Sunday he'd record a new memo and stuff like that. This was before email. Just to do it. Right. Just to have an impact. Right. That eventually went to faxes. Right. Faxes went to email, and he's been doing now well over 30 years. And a little background about Roy. He started as a little, a radio guy helping small businesses, and he decided to start doing advertising for these businesses. But he had a very unique model from day one, which is you pay him a small amount, and then it's month to month, and you pay him based on how much he grows your company. Right. And he had clients for 20-something plus years, paying him month after month, who had grown tens of thousands of percent. They were paying him a significant amount, to the point where he was able to purchase 31 acres in the hill country in Texas here. And half of it is part of Williams Marketing still, and the other half is a non-for-profit 501c3 Wizard Academy, which includes Chapel Dulcinea, a free wedding chapel where there's over 1,000 weddings every year.
That's a beautiful story in its own right.
Oh, in its own right. And he married his high school sweetheart, Penny, and he just believes in the value of commitment. That's why it's month to month. Either we're committed or we're not.
Right.
And one day I'm at a Barnes and Noble. Yeah, this is when everything was going on. Yeah, but this is when things were shaky back then. And I stumbled across one of his books on his bookshelf. What most people don't know is he had a little self-published book, Does Your Ad Dog Bark? Beforehand. You want to see if you can find one of those.
I'll find one of those.
There's only a few around, but it's pretty amazing. And then a publisher, also from the Austin area, Ray Bard, found it and said, I want to repackage this and put it out. And he brought in a young Mike Drew, who has since gone on to help over 100 plus authors become New York Times bestselling authors and understanding marketing of books and platforms and all of that. Yep. And so I find this book on the shelf, and I literally almost finished the book while I'm there in the store. And I brought it home, and I gave it to my brother. And after we had just started our business and trying to figure out, no one cared about sales online. It was all sock puppets and traffic and eyeballs and a whole different world. And we were like, this guy probably understands us, and he, like we're coming from a very similar place. And so Jeffrey calls Corinne, which is Roy's administrative assistant, and said, can we speak with him? She says, well, he actually does these free seminars on Fridays. You can come on down. And we had just come from a bankruptcy prior to that. So it wasn't like we had a lot of cash, but we were like, okay, and so Jeffrey flew down and we became friends, and he's been mentoring us for years. And 30 plus years of nonstop content and influencing tons of business. He's been, American Express found him to be one of the top advertising guys from small business. De Beers contacted him because, his little jewelry shop sold more diamonds than anybody. Procter & Gamble, like it's crazy. The people have come to him.
But it's the power of the words. It's the power of the self-reflection.
And the stories.
And I think at the core of what I've seen him do is really challenge you to draw out your better story.
Correct.
The fuller story, not the margin, not the sales. It's the human story that is going to engage and attract.
With all your frailties and vulnerabilities and quirks. Yeah. Like when he started working with Ken Goodrich from Gettle, right? Way back when, who's now sold that company, but he took that to a $100 million HVAC company. He told the story of a little boy who followed his father and held a flashlight, and all his trucks had that image. It's just, this is who Ken was. And by letting people know who you are, right? Because people buy from people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things for me with founders. It's like founders want to stay so often behind their company, but don't realize they're the most powerful voice for their company. They're that biggest advocate. And same thing with the charities. And people like to stay behind and don't tell their authentic story.
But with the charities, it's this fear of self-promotion. And I think it's the founder problem too. I can think of a founder sitting here with us that is not a self-promoter.
Nope.
And will tell you that was probably a regret in the career.
Yeah.
Because if they had put themselves out there, they'd be a pillar in that industry. And I've seen where you've put yourself out there. You've been on the keynote circuit. But you're inspiring people to do more. And with our conversation today, I really want to drive the idea for nonprofit leaders to be okay with telling your story. Charity Ace is rolling out a product. We have it available online now for press release tools. And press release is a great and easy entry point into digital marketing. And we want to bring the price down. We want to make it really accessible to the masses because it has such a big impact. Forever. The long tail of press releases fun.
Well, there's a few things that are going on, especially right now. So, when we first started in the industry, like Roy, right, there was no online. So he started way before that. When he started publishing online, he kind of was easier to find, right?
Yeah.
When we first started, again, there was almost no content at all. There was, there's no field of conversion rate optimization. So no field of web
Google
analytics.
Google didn't do it.
Google. This was before Google.
Right.
Yeah. We were back in the days of Alta Vista and Lycos and Excite and Yahoo. Yeah, it was a whole different world. And so we had to create the content, the vocabulary. And it was something I learned early on in my career, which is he who creates the vocabulary controls the industry.
He who makes the form forms the decisions.
Correct. And so we were able to leverage that and become known because we were telling people, hey, when a visitor comes to your site and doesn't stay, and I'm going to tell you an interesting story about that one. That's a bounce. Right. Or a reject rate, which is what Web Trends made it change it to afterwards. But
I wanted to hear that story because bounce rate is what I see today in the dashboard.
Correct.
And you coined that.
Correct.
You and your brother.
No, me, my brother, and Jim Novo.
Okay.
So Jim Novo and I wrote the Marketer's Common Sense Guide to E-Metrics as an ebook in 2001, and then Web Trends licensed that ebook and started giving it out. And they were just moving away from their log analyzers to the JavaScript bugs that everybody knows today.
Yep.
And they were kind of rebranding, and they wanted everything to kind of jive together. So they asked us to make a couple of edits, and we're like, okay. But the story of the bounce, it goes way, again, something we talked about earlier. There's nothing new.
Right.
So Jim Novo and I, we had our conversion metrics, but Jim Novo had this experience. He was the former head of Interactive for the Home Shopping Network.
Okay.
And he would share stories they would realize if people call in and if there wasn't enough operators or they were hanging up too early, That was a bounce.
Yeah.
So they needed to bring in more operators, or, there were certain questions that people were asking on the calls that they would then signal to, to the on-share host, hey, start answering these. And all of a sudden sales improved. That was conversion rate optimization on the fly. And it's like nothing new.
We're just seeing it in a different form now.
Correct.
And we have to capture it. But how many of these digital marketers are going back to the home shopping network in the early and mid 90s to say, what did we learn from call center banks that are expensive? And how do we leverage that in today's world?
Correct. Well, you touch on a very important chapter that I have in the book, the shape of the problem, right? Henry Ford, the classic example, right? He just looked at, meat packing as a disassembly line and said, well, how do I reverse engineer that to make an assembly line? Mm-hmm. These problems have never been an issue in the past, or they have, and they've solved them. There's just new ways to do it. So right now, if I'm a founder, if I'm a head of a charity, I need visibility. I need to get other people to know my story. I need people to relate to my story. And what we're finding now is, AI and the press releases, all the LLMs, because I'm watching it in my kids, right? My kids are 24 to 16. They're barely using Google anymore. It's all ChatGPT, it's Perplexity, Copilot, it's all these tools. And the stories are being pulled from press releases, from these stories that they're finding online, because the top of the funnel is so radically changing right now that if you're not in line with understanding, again, the core fundamentals behind it, the new tools are just different ways to leverage it. And AI and press releases are a phenomenal way to do that.
But all the more reason that I think we have to look in the mirror, and as nonprofit leaders, as fundraisers out in the world, there is nothing new. But the problem remains the same. What's your core offer? How are you inspiring someone to impact? How are you telling the story of the impact of that giving?
The WIIFM problem.
Yeah. And WIFM's a great example, because their WIFM starts to become, I want to have a successful event.
Yep.
That's different than the mission that you're serving. And how do we close that gap?
Correct.
Taking away the human side of events are hard.
Yeah.
Events are time consuming. Events are detailed.
Lots of logistics. Yep.
It's easy to miss the core principle and the core offer that you're having that event so you can raise money.
To have an impact on your charity's
Not
goal.
to cover the cost of the event.
Correct.
And that's where I want to challenge, like, with these new tools, with access, with reflection, tell your better story and tell it often.
And tell the impact that you're having so that people can do it. I mean, I know on my podcast, the Rock Solid Round Rock podcast, I've had Adina Kavanaugh from Ascension Seton. She does all the fundraising for Ascension Seton. She does a phenomenal job, super active in the community. She tells her story. And, they talk specifically, and they bring donors around to show them, no, this bought this piece of equipment so we can take care of it. Like, yes, that matters.
And when you bought that equipment, that's a press release.
Correct.
That you should be putting out and talking about, because that's the news of impact.
Correct. And I don't know if she's currently doing that part as a PR piece.
I can probably safely say no.
Probably not. Because we'll have to send her this clip and make sure.
I would love to know. Because her predecessor was a gentleman named Gerald Hill that I have huge respect for, who went out and really helped Ascension Seton build in Central Texas and make the impact that they do today. And he is an impact-driven person, and that's inspiring, because that's what the donor wants to celebrate.
Correct.
So it transitions me into some other models that you have around customer centricity, and Be Like Amazon is a book that you wrote, and it's a great book, and it's an inspiring concept. But I think people miss the moment on what is Amazon.
Correct.
And Amazon is not a bookstore.
No, it's a new operating system for business. Jeff Bezos is probably, Warren Buffett called him the best CEO probably of all time. I remember when I was younger, they used to say, you could be, customer-centric, you could be price competitive, or you can be operationally excellent, but you couldn't be all three. No.
You can be all three.
He found a way to do all three.
But the key to it is the core.
Correct. and how you align around that core. And that's what he did so brilliantly. And he didn't just do it at Amazon. He did it at the web
AWS,
services.
yeah.
He did it when he bought the Washington Post. There was a great article that talked about that. And so what was funny is that the book Be Like Amazon came about because I had written an initial article about it. And one of my friends was interviewing for Amazon. And in her email from the recruiter, they linked to that article.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so having that validation that they thought it told their story just as well as they do, right? Because I told it in a broader outside perspective so other people can see it, right? They had different words for how they described the things. But that was able to basically align them around, hey, brand Amazon is about, I mean, when I talk to people, everybody says it, right? I want a good price. I want to get things fast. If there's a problem, I want them to take care of it. And they have a huge selection of everything. And so part of what they've done is their product managers are responsible for those same 4 key metrics. Right. So here's what the brand, from the customer perspective, what it matters. Now, as a brand manager, I say, okay, selection. I need to have 5 to 7 times the amount of selection as the top competitors. I need to keep the price within 5% of all the top competitors, and that they do automated with AI, which is they've been doing that for years. They're always tops in customer service satisfaction American Index every year. They're always at the very top of it. And then obviously they've invested in all this infrastructure to deliver things faster than anybody. And when you understand that everything's been built around, okay, so how does that alignment piece work with the way they keep growing? Because they didn't solve everything day one. In fact, Jeff Bezos was turned down 60 times by investors before he got the first yes. And so, of course, we look at founders who've bankrupted, and we've got a couple here, right? A couple of times. Like, that's part of the process. He says, okay, look, the first thing is we need to be Earth's most customer-centric company. Mm-hmm. And this is one that almost everybody gets wrong, and most charities get wrong as well. They believe they're customer-centric, and Bain did a study on this, and they found out, they interviewed 376 executives, and they asked them, do you feel like you deliver superior customer value, and are you customer-centric? And 80% of the executives believed they were, or at least admitted that they thought they were. And then when they asked their customers, only 8% agreed. So that's a huge delivery gap that we're talking about there. So what is customer centricity? I mean, it's not what most people think. When I look at Amazon's success, it became very simple when you look at them from the frameworks, like how do they compete with Walmart, which is the largest data center of companies. I mean, back when my brother was in finance, so this is
mid-90s.
Early 90s.
Okay.
And he dealt with international finance. I mean, he remembers a story where Walmart called in his client Colgate, and they told him they needed to shrink the packaging by I don't know how many centimeters because it would bring a yield of this much more per like they had so much crazy data. But the difference is you could be Walmart's most valuable customer in the world. You could be spending $10,000, $100,000 a year. Doesn't matter. I've never been in there, and they wouldn't know the difference when I walked into the store.
Right.
Oops, that's not customer-centric, okay? With Amazon, from day one, why they exploded, and I think most people miss this, is it used to have to log on, and of course they had their cookies and the affiliates with all their cookies, and they were able to track all that kind of data. Yeah. That was brilliant. But when the iPhone came out, and now they immediately tied in cell phone number to the email address, they were able to track everything in that universe, and they knew every click, everything you were wishing for. They knew when you purchased this, you were likely to purchase this later on. And they turned that into the powerhouse.
But they turned it into the powerhouse by focusing on every little piece of it, all the way down to
the little bytes.
Packaging, right?
Yeah, the little bytes, the tape that they used. Yeah, because that customer innovation never has to stop. You're always trying to figure out, how can I make the experience that much better than my customer? Because I got to stay ahead of them, not my competitors. And then I've got to be able to execute on that, which that's where so many businesses get caught up. They struggle on that. I've got to optimize it, right? Or measure it and make sure that's good. And then I got to optimize it. Yeah. And repeat that cycle over and over and over again. And that's a lot of hard work. That takes a lot of discipline. And it's the same as losing 100 pounds.
Well, it takes a lot of data too. And the data, the donor centricity is what I want to focus on, because
Yep.
it goes back to that storytelling. If I'm donor centric,
Yep.
I have to think about everything from the invitation to come to the event, the why, and I have to remind you often as you're getting an Amazon package on your door, I need to be telling you, here's the impact that you're creating with
and
this.
the recognition
Right.
for what you've done.
Right. And the recognition should be every interaction you have with us. Thank you. Have you
Yep.
heard the latest impact you've had?
Yeah.
And I think nonprofits, all nonprofits have that story.
Correct. The problem is most of them don't have the infrastructure in place today to track all of that.
Right.
And that needs to be their number one priority.
Well, and we work with some great software partners for event software. And I look forward to celebrating that in a bigger way, because really it is putting intelligent systems around these organizations that are economically, they fit the model.
Yep.
They come in with great intentionality and purpose.
Yep.
My problem is, as soon as that event's done,
You don't hear
that
from
data
them.
disappears, because the nonprofit volunteer base
Yep.
doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't know how to action it, doesn't know how to read the feedback, and is sometimes afraid to ask for the feedback.
You know, Amazon had their way of collecting their data, but Amazon bought a company that collected data in a completely different way that I think is also important for not-for-profits. So they acquired Zappos.
Okay.
And I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to take the tour of the Zappos call center.
I didn't, but I've read the HBR reviews on Zappos.
Okay. So what's interesting about the Zappos call centers was, you know, if you've ever worked in a call center, you know the number one goal is answer, how fast I answer it, how fast I can hang up. Zappos was the exact opposite. Why? Zappos wanted to take the time to learn everything they could about their customer. Oh, you have a dog, you have a birthday coming up, you're celebrating this. All of that was human knowledge that they were able to leverage as part of their brand building. They'd celebrate things with their customers.
Surprise and delight.
Correct. And so, yeah, I can take that, you know, objective data, and I can now take this subjective data, put it together, and oh my God. So yeah, collect that event. But what about all the conversations you're having with them, all the emails, all the content they are engaging or not engaging with, right? If you don't understand that, right, you're not serving your donors.
You're not serving your mission.
Correct.
And if you're not putting your story out there, you're not collecting the feedback.
Correct.
But what you are doing, and I know this is true because these are hardworking people that love what they do, they love their mission, they're having every one of those conversations.
Yep.
But it's not captured. It's not tracked. It's not
Correct.
followed through. And if it is, it's only followed through with that direct person. So now it's not the magnify or the amplification of impact is not there, because it's a one-on-one conversation.
Exactly.
You got the donation, you close the deal, it's done. And the donor doesn't want recognition. Okay. But we can still talk about the impact that donor had without naming the donor.
Correct.
We can still create the news, the newsworthy news of, hey, we got impact, and then here's what we did with it.
And more than that, which is what's so sexy today, is I can put out a press release, and in the AI world, I can know precisely in a very short amount of time whether it resonated with people or not, right? You know, what kind of impressions did it get? What kind of click-throughs did it get? And you can get that feedback loop so fast that, you know, okay, this isn't the angle that my audience really wants. Let me try a different angle next time. And again, you know, maybe you're not great at telling that story from a different angle, but, you know, you can, we have some tools in here that help explain it, but the AI tools out there can also help you change that same release and write in different perspectives to see which one actually resonates the best.
Well, we'll talk about one more book, and then I've got my final question for you. But Buyer's Legends comes to mind, and it's the art of storytelling.
Yes.
And if you challenge a nonprofit, come up with what are those legends. They all have them.
Correct.
And I love hearing them. I get the privilege of hearing them firsthand, because we're talking about their next event, what they want to do, how we're inspire impact. And they say, well, let me tell you what we did last year. I'm like, great. Why aren't we telling that story to everybody? Because that should be the first lead magnet that brings people in to say, I want to give to this mission because they're making an impact, and here's how I can validate that.
Yeah, I mean, I would the first thing when you announce your next gala, right? I would take the story of last year. This is what we did. This is what we raised. This is who was there, and here is what we did because of that event. This year, we're hoping to do X, Y, and Z now.
The beauty is they put that in their annual report, but who do they send their impact reports to?
Correct.
And so we see a big vision of how do we help tie all of that together? How do we tie it into platforms that use technology today in an affordable way for a nonprofit?
Yep.
And really maximize their conversion because they have a story to tell. And how do we get it there? I love that you were part of the shopping cart and like continue shopping.
Yep.
Because you're right. I mean, we can get somebody to the gala, but that's just one. You
Correct.
put one thing.
That's
in the
one
bus,
micro conversion. Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
It's how do we do the rest that really makes the impact.
Yeah, they've got to be living advocates. And it's one of the biggest chapters I talk about in the book, right? They've got to be sharing your brandable chunks, right? The words that matter to you, the way you express your business. They've got to be able to kind of tell that story in their own way, but leverage those words. That's what word of mouth marketing actually is, saying something in a unique way that people can say, oh, yeah, that only ties back to this charity, and then pass it to somebody else. And that's how you grow your influence.
You've had the privilege to be in a lot of really cool companies at early stages when I mean, Google was still a startup.
Yep.
And now we're in a world where it's very analytical. Everybody's overanalyzing things. I think there's a fault line there somewhere.
Yep.
But now introduce AI. And so my question for you, as you've been through so many cultures and you've been through so many phases
Gray hair,
of business.
yes.
Well, I don't think it's time-based. I think you've just been in a lot. What's the cultural element that comes out that challenges the analytical element? Because an analytical brain looking at some of this does not work. But I see AI as very analytical, not emotional.
Yeah.
And I worry for our nonprofit sector in particular that we're going to become so analytical that we lose the power of the words that you and Roy talk about. And how do we bring that together, and what's been the impact of that?
Yeah, I've done a number of experiments with AI, and I love it as a tool. And I talk about it in the book, right? It helped me knock out the first draft of the book in 10 days.
Right.
But it took additional 5+ months of editing and refining to get it to where it is, because it needed to have an emotional impact on people. That's the only thing that matters. And Roy wrote a book with my friend Michael Drude several years ago called Pendulum.
Okay.
And he talks about the world going these 40-year cycles. And so we go from, one extreme, kind of swing back down to the middle, then swing back up to the other extreme. And we're entering a way more analytical stream. We're kind of hitting the edges of it. Mm-hmm. And we're going to start swinging down that, no, at the end of the day, just like we've always learned, relationships matter, connection matter. COVID was a time that really stress tested us in so many ways, right? We were so isolated that it fractured a lot of people emotionally. And so it was easy to lean into Zoom meetings and technology and kind of replace it. But it left a lot of us with a big void. It's part of what, helped me go kind of in the bad spiral over the last few years. But luckily, because of my work with the chamber and several nonprofits and, my wife's business, Place at Home North Austin, we're involved with people and solving people problems.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that truly is where most reward happens from. And when you can just engage with people every day, that's where the big impact comes from. I mean, I have a fellow Round Rock Chamber ambassador, Diana Lindsay. Mm-hmm. She's basically, the ambassador for Backpack Friends. They feed kids who are, food hungry with backpacks of food every week. And her and Tom Cotter and his wife, they're impacting thousands of Central Texans every week. And they run galas. They're doing a monthly membership thing. They're doing all that, but she's out every day events at the Round Rock Chamber, the Cedar Park Chamber, the Pflugerville Chamber. It's about the people.
Relationship.
And people coming in and packing the backpacks for the kids and they make parties out of it.
Yep.
So that people can feel like, no, look, I'm feeding a kid who's going to go hungry if I don't pack that bag.
Yep.
They feel impact that way. And they're doing a fabulous job with a very small, team. And just to see that, it's like, yeah, that's amazing.
Harnessing the human event. And that is the impact.
Correct.
In Bernie, we have Blessings in a Backpack. It's a very similar concept. And every Thursday, I know there's a party at the back of a big 18-wheeler packing backpacks to go into kids that need it.
Yeah.
And if we forget that, if we become too analytical, if we become chasing the metrics,
chasing the algorithms,
it's clicky.
Yep.
I want the clicks. I want you to come, but I want you to come because you were called to impact.
Correct, because we want to make a difference in that kid's life. We want to make in the life of someone who's suffering with a terrible illness, whatever the charity is. Or my friend Will Williams from Share the Will, right? He's just trying to impact veterans and people in the community, and he's got hundreds of volunteers. Just this past week, we were at Step Into Success, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the events they do with the Round Rock Police Department where they get kids running shoes for the first day of school because they know the impact that can make, that they don't have to come and beat up shoes and ones that don't fit. And 1,500 kids registered. Yeah. And just to be there to serve and pour into those families.
In a perceived wealthy community. And this is
correct.
The myth of wealthy communities is a hard one because the Hill Country has that.
Yep.
But I can tell you the school districts are between 30 and 70% on programs.
Correct.
And it's an opportunity to give back in so many ways. And I just want to call for any charity that's looking to say, we're so busy doing the people side of it, we don't know how to do the technology side of it. We're here to help. And we've got people like you that are also ready to help.
Yeah.
And drive that impact.
And help them tell that story a little better.
Right. Because it's going to move the mission. And when we say donor-centric,
yep,
I think that's going to lead the nonprofit revolution that is coming because donors, I don't think, are always fully appreciated for their impact. And I don't think they become the amplifier of the mission when you're not saying, thank you, here's what that did. And when you can do that well, those amplifiers go out and drive the best marketing, which is referral marketing, back into your mission.
I kind of want to wrap up with a reason why this book even existed, because I wasn't going to write another book. I'm sure you've heard of the Savannah Bananas and Jesse Cole.
I love the Savannah.
Okay, and how they've exploded. 2019, I'm engaging on Twitter, and a package shows up at our P.O. box. I open it up, and it's a note from Jesse Cole. Okay, with some T-shirts and all of that. And it was kind of cool. He invited me to be on his podcast. And he's coming here to Round Rock in November, so I'm really excited to see him in person. Never got a chance to see him in person. And Jesse wrote us in his note, thank you, for engaging with us. And he said, our book, Be Like Amazon, inspired his fans' first mentality. But the we believe statements, which I talk about here, which we talk about in Be Like Amazon, which we talked about at the beginning of the show, is part of his daily vocabulary. Yeah. And I said, I don't write the book now any longer to be a New York Times bestselling author. I've done that. I've checked that box off of my life. I don't need that. But I said, I impacted one person, Jesse Cole, and he had a dream and he had a vision and he's chased it. And he is now selling out 81,000 person stadiums, 3 million person waiting list to come see them play their version of baseball, banana ball. And it's like, if I can impact one person who can impact millions, I've done my job.
Right.
But watch what Jesse has done, how he's rewritten the rules to understand the customer of today. And if you're a charity and you're not looking at banana ball as a way of the shape of the problem and how to solve what we're all dealing with, you're missing out.
Right. Oh, beautiful story. And to inspire one, to inspire that many. And that's what we do. That's correct. What every nonprofit is out there doing. You're finding your Jesse.
Yep.
And they are going to go move a mountain.
Exactly.
And let's inspire that. So Bryan, thank you so much for the time today and all of your work that's led to this. I think it's a great privilege to see where it's going to go from here. And as we go into the new form of the web, let's find a way to balance analytic and storytelling and really make the most of it.
And connect with humans.
Yeah, be human.
Just like this.
Yeah, let's do more good together.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.